Hey, what's up everyone? Craig here. So this video is one I wish existed when I was starting my tropical and exotic style garden. It's a video all about plants with huge, gigantic, jungly leaves that you can grow outdoors anywhere with a cold winter, like me here in the UK. These gigantic leaves are the best way to give your garden that tropical and exotic jungle look. Every single plant I talk about in this video, I'm going to give you the plant name as well as some tips on growing it. Right, just before we start, if you're watching this video and you've watched any of my other videos and you haven't hit subscribe, please do me a favour and hit subscribe. It'll take you less than a second and you will help towards growing this community of plant lovers that love the tropical and exotic style garden. Let's get into it. How can we have a list about giant, jungly leaved plants that doesn't include Gunnera manicata, commonly called the Brazilian giant rhubarb, and you can see why. This plant is Jurassic. It is absolutely enormous and it grows this big from ground level every single year. Here in the UK, when winter comes, you cut back that season's growth and lay the leaves upside down on the crown of the plant. That'll do two things. It will stop the rain saturating the crown of the plant, and you don't want wet and cold because that can kill these exotic plants. But it will also act as a protective layer, a bit like a fleece on tender plants in winter, and it will just help protect the heart of the plant from any cold, persevering weather in winter. These plants love to grow with lots of light in moist soil. So grow them streamside, beside your ponds, or in a bucket and just give it plenty of water and feed, and you will be treated to these enormous jungly leaves all summer long. Now, be careful when you're buying Gunnera manicata. They are often mislabeled in garden centres. There's another Gunnera species called Tinctoria. And Tinctoria, although it's a beautiful jungly leafed plant in its own right, it has much smaller leaves than Gunnera manicata. So buy from somewhere reputable to make sure you're getting the right plant. Gunnera manicata. Now, if you like the look of Gunnera manicata but you don't have space for such enormous leaves in your garden, consider growing Darmera peltata, commonly called the umbrella plant. It has such a similar look to Gunnera, and they're often grown together because they both love growing in poorly drained, boggy soils. Darmera is an unusual plant. It sends up its flower spike in spring before it produces any leaves. You get a tall spike covered in white flowers. That dies back and then it puts up these beautiful, round, big, jungly leaves. Like I say, it doesn't grow as tall as Gunnera manicata, but it has that same effect, so it will suit growing in a pot or beside your pond if you have a smaller space, and you will still get that jungly foliage effect. Just like Gunnera manicata, this plant dies back in winter. So cut back the old growth and you can lay the leaves over the crown of the plant or over where it's planted below soil level, just to give it that extra level of protection. And like I say, in spring, you'll be treated to those flowers and then all of that jungly foliage again through the next growing season. Again, that plant is Darmera peltata, commonly called the umbrella plant. The next plant is undoubtedly one of the most magnificent plants that you can grow here in the UK for big jungly leaves. Which one is it? Tetrapanax papyrifer, commonly called the rice paper plant. This exotic plant grows enormous leaves, some of the biggest in your garden, and they are held out almost horizontally from a tall woody stem. If you live in mild parts of the UK, it can be almost semi-evergreen through the winter months. If you live somewhere that gets cold frost, you're going to want to protect the main stem because that could get frosted back and you'll lose the height from the previous growing season. But don't worry, even if the stem gets frosted back, these plants often reshoot from ground level because they're root hardy. There are several different forms available of Tetrapanax papyrifer, and the one shown in this video is one called Rex. This is a really desirable plant because Rex has really deeply lobed leaves, and each leaf has an almost three-dimensional shape to it. Rather than sitting flat, they're really corrugated, and it has this beautiful architectural form in a jungle garden. This is one of my favourite plants for a tropical or exotic style garden. They are super easy to grow. If you get a young Tetrapanax plant and you plant it into your garden, they can seem quite slow the first year, but they're just establishing their roots. In the second year, you will be surprised how quickly they grow tall and how big those leaves get. Tetrapanax is an amazing big-leaved plant for a tropical or exotic style garden, and if you can find one, I urge you to give it a go. Next up on this list is a giant-leaved jungly plant that will actually produce edible fruits. It used to be called Solanum betaceum, but it's been reclassified as Cyphomandra betacea. I can remember it. More easy to remember though is its common name, the tree tomato. This plant has enormous heart-shaped leaves that go all the way up its stem. Now, it's not actually a tomato at all, it's a tamarillo, and this plant is perennial and it can get a woody stem. They're only half hardy here in the UK, so if you get severely cold winters, you're going to want to move it somewhere warmer like a greenhouse or conservatory to protect it in the winter months. And if it gets too tall, and believe me, it could in one season from seed, these plants are really fast growing. If it gets too tall, you can cut the top off to fit it into wherever you store your plants for winter, and it will reshoot from the stem in spring. The tamarillo fruits on this plant have a bitter skin and the flesh is said to be quite sweet. I've not eaten one yet, but I've got lots of plants growing, and as you can see, this is a seedling I sowed maybe 6 to 8 weeks ago. See what I mean? They grow so quickly. So I'm going to pot this up because it's only in a 9cm pot now, and I will have even bigger jungly foliage in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully some delicious fruit to try later in the year. That's the tree tomato, Cyphomandra betacea. Next up on this list is a plant called Musschia wollastonii, and you very rarely see this plant available in the UK. It forms this indulgent rosette of long sword-shaped leaves with a nicely serrated edge. It is really architectural, and this rosette can get 4 or 5 feet wide. It takes 2 or 3 years for this plant to flower, but when it does, you're treated to a flower spike that protrudes out from the centre of the rosette of leaves, and it has masses of airy, creamy yellow flowers. After blooming, Musschia wollastonii will die, but you'll be treated to hundreds, if not thousands of seeds from that flower spike. This plant is pretty easy to grow from seed if you've got fresh seed. And like I say, it is a real architectural statement in any tropical or exotic style garden. If you're looking for a plant with big leaves, then this is one that definitely needs to be on your list. Now, there's no plant really more synonymous with lush jungles than ferns. And if we want a fern with gigantic leaves, look no further than Woodwardia radicans, or the European chain fern. I've chosen this one because it is surprisingly tough and hardy here in the UK, especially if you're down south or in the milder city areas. Even if it does get frosted back, it will often regrow from the crown of the plant, so don't worry if you're in a colder area, you can still give this a go. Woodwardia radicans is an imposing fern that has these enormous arching fronds, and I've seen them 5-6 foot long. They are absolutely massive, and they call it the chain fern or walking fern because as each frond grows, it will touch the ground, and where it touches the ground, you get a tiny little bulbil form, which is the beginning of a new plant. So if you have one, give it time to mature, and you'll be able to propagate from it and have many. I've got several in my garden, and I've been propagating from them for a couple of years now. But for foliage, these plants are almost unbeatable in the fern world. And for me, they are evergreen. So in the depths of winter, when a lot of my ferny foliage has died back, this plant is still doing its thing and giving my tropical garden that lush, exotic look, even in the cold winter months. And I think that's so important. We want our gardens to look lush and jungly year round, not just enjoy them in the summer. So Woodwardia radicans, or the European chain fern, is definitely a gigantic leaved jungly fern that you should try in your garden. Next up on the list is a plant that's native to Korea and Japan, and it is tough, hardy, perennial, and it has giant leaves. It's Rodgersia podophylla, and it has these leaves of 5 or 7 palmate sections that get to maybe 2, 3, 4 foot across, and in June and July you're treated to a flower spike of quite feathery, light, creamy white flowers which contrast so well against that thick architectural foliage. In winter these plants die back. So long as you don't have a long, persistent cold winter, it will reshoot every single year. They are properly tough and they love a cool, shady, moist site. That's Rodgersia podophylla. And the final plant on this list of plants with big leaves for jungle effects is not actually a tree, though it's often referred to as one. And a little fact for you, it's one of the biggest herbs in the world. It's the banana. In fact, it's the cold, hardy banana that we can grow here in the UK with very little protection. It's the Musa basjoo. It's the green-leaved banana that looks so tropical in any garden or pot. And these plants are root hardy. So even if your plant gets frosted down to the ground in winter, you'll see lots of little banana pups shooting from the base next spring, which you can divide and you'll have several new plants. If you do have persevering cold winters, then you can wrap the main stem of the plant, which is actually a pseudo stem, it's just made up of old leaves. You can wrap that, because it's herbaceous, it's going to need protecting, in fleece, and it will just give it that extra layer of protection so that you'll maintain your height for the following season and you'll get those beautiful, lush, jungly banana leaves every single year. I've grown it in my garden, then I took it out, now I've added it back and I wouldn't be without it. It's just a great plant for reliable jungly foliage. And like I say, it's called the hardy banana for a reason. If your stem's frosted back, it will shoot from the roots, and if your stem isn't, you will just get a taller and taller plant every year. They are a great big-leaved plant to add to your tropical and exotic style garden. Okay, so some bonus care tips for you for big-leaved jungly plants. First up, big leaves use and lose a lot of water. Now what do I mean by that? It takes a lot of water to keep a big leaf turgid. Great word, but it's the botanical word. Now turgid just means keep the cells hydrated basically, and keep the leaf nice and rigid. But all of that surface area, ironically, loses a lot of water. In fact, this plant has been dripping on my arm the whole time we've been doing this video. So this means that if you're growing big leaf plants, they're going to need to be watered a lot. And a lot of them grow in moist soil, like many of the plants that were featured in this video. But how can you kind of benefit and improve the look and health of your plants beyond watering? Now that comes down to feed. And big leafy plants love a high nitrogen feed. So things like chicken manure, spent mushroom compost, liquid seaweed are all great feeds that you can apply to your plants throughout the growing season, maybe once or twice a week, to keep them a lush, dark green and to encourage the leaves to grow nice and big and strong. I've also found that so many of the big leaf plants actually thrive in partial shade, even if the label says full sun. It just gives them relief from the scorching sun that will dehydrate the plant and cause the leaves to wilt. And where they are looking for more light, because they're growing in partial shade, they'll actually grow bigger leaves because they're trying to increase that surface area to find sunlight. That's my tips on caring for plants with big jungly leaves. So there you go, that's a list of giant leaf plants that I really wish existed when I was starting my tropical style garden. Hopefully you found it really helpful, and there's some plants there that you either already grow or you might want to add to your tropical or exotic style garden. As I said at the start of the video, if you did find it helpful, please hit that subscribe button. It really does help me out, and it will take you less than a second. And I've also got a plant and seed shop, so feel free to check that out. I'll link it in the bottom and there'll be a link at the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to check out my channel where I've got plant profiles on tropical and exotic plants, as well as loads of tours and tips and vlogs. I will see you all in the next video. Ciao!